My name is Alara, and I am 34 years old. For the past 7 years, I've been married to Ben, a man whose quiet strength is the bedrock of my world. I spend my days with my hands in clay, a potter who finds solace in the spin of the wheel and the slow, deliberate process of shaping earth into something of use, something of beauty. My life is a quiet one, built on routine and the simple joy of creation. My younger brother, Liam, has always been my anchor to the world outside my studio. He is the idealist to my pragmatist, the boundless heart to my cautious hands. So, when he called, his voice incandescent with joy, to announce he was getting married, my own heart swelled for him. He and his fiancée, Serafina, were planning a destination wedding on the Oregon coast, a place of shared childhood memories, and we were, of course, overjoyed for them. The first 2 days were a dream spun from sea mist and champagne. The venue, a grand old house perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, was magnificent. The weather held, a rare gift of late autumn sun on that wild coastline. The celebrations were filled with laughter and hope. Then came the third day. We were at the post-wedding brunch, the air thick with the scent of salt and coffee, the murmur of happy conversation a gentle hum around us. Liam and his new wife were radiant. It was then that Ben, who had been uncharacteristically quiet all morning, leaned toward me, his hand resting on my arm. "We need to leave," he whispered, his voice so low it was almost lost in the clinking of glasses. "Right now." I froze, a piece of brioche halfway to my mouth. "What are you talking about?" I murmured back, trying to keep my expression neutral. "We can't just walk out." He didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed across the room. When he finally turned to me, his eyes, usually so warm and steady, were filled with a chilling gravity. "You really haven't seen it, have you?" "Seen what?" I asked, my own unease beginning to crystallize into real fear. "The bride." Serafina, what my husband said next made my stomach feel as if it had dropped from the cliffside into the churning waves below. We arrived at the Saltwood Manor, a sprawling timber and glass home near Cannon Beach, on a Thursday afternoon. The air was crisp, carrying the briny tang of the ocean and the damp, earthy scent of the surrounding pines. Liam had spared no expense, renting the entire estate for the long weekend to house our immediate family and the wedding party. The house was a work of art, with vast windows that framed the dramatic seascape and haystack rock rising like an ancient monolith from the surf. As we parked, I saw my parents, Helen and Arthur, on the wide cedar deck, talking with Liam. My father, a man who had built his life and reputation on the honest craft of bespoke furniture, was gesturing with his hands, describing the grain of the wood on the deck railings. My mother, elegant and composed as always, smiled, her silver hair a bright crown in the afternoon light. "They're here," Liam shouted, his voice full of the unadulterated joy that had defined him since childhood. He was 31, a passionate environmental lawyer, but in that moment, he was the boy I'd grown up with, racing me to the water's edge. He bounded down the steps and pulled me into a hug that smelled of sea air and happiness. "Where's the bride-to-be?" I asked, after he'd released me and shaken Ben's hand with a warmth that was pure Liam. "Getting settled in the guest cottage with her cousin," he beamed. "You'll meet her at dinner tonight. Alara, you're going to adore her. She's everything." I'd only met Serafina Vance twice. Once, for a brief, formal dinner in Portland, and again at their engagement party a few months ago. She had been perfectly lovely on both occasions, though our conversations had been fleeting. Liam had met her just under a year ago, at a fundraiser for a land conservancy trust. Theirs was a romance of storybook speed, a whirlwind courtship, an engagement after 6 months, and now, this breathtaking wedding. "Your room is on the second floor, ocean-facing," Liam explained, guiding us inside. "Mom and Dad are in the West Wing. Sarah and I are keeping to the guest cottage until the wedding. You know, for tradition." The room was stunning. A king-sized bed faced a wall of glass that opened onto a private balcony. The ocean was a constant, soothing presence, its rhythmic roar a counterpoint to the quiet elegance of the space. As I began to unpack, Ben sank onto the plush duvet. "This must have set Liam back a fortune," he mused, his architect's eye taking in the fine details of the room's construction. Serafina's family is helping with most of it, I said, remembering what Liam had told us. Her father is in international shipping, old money from the East Coast. Apparently, they're incredibly generous. The welcome dinner was held in the manor's great room, before a massive stone fireplace. Fairy lights were woven through the exposed timber beams overhead, casting a soft, golden glow. I saw Serafina the moment we entered. She was wearing an ivory-colored cashmere dress, her dark hair swept up in a seemingly effortless chignon. She was beautiful, not in a flashy way, but with a deep, quiet grace that was immediately captivating. "Elara," she exclaimed, her smile warm and genuine as she crossed the room to embrace me. "I'm so incredibly happy you're here. Liam has told me so much about you. I feel like I know you already." There was a polish to her warmth, a practiced perfection, but I attributed it to the natural stress of hosting one's own wedding. I introduced her properly to Ben. "The brilliant architect," she said, her smile widening. "Liam told me you're designing the new wing for the Portland Art Museum. That's such an important project for the city." Ben looked genuinely pleased. "He mentioned you're a curator, specializing in Renaissance art." "Oh, it was just a fellowship at the Uffizi Gallery years ago," she said with a little wave of her hand, as if dismissing a great accomplishment. "My focus now is more on philanthropy and supporting the arts." Throughout dinner, I watched her. She moved through the small gathering with an innate social intelligence, making every single person feel as if they were the most important one in the room. She was especially attentive to my father, asking insightful questions about his work, about the challenges of sourcing sustainable hardwoods, her brow furrowed in concentration as he spoke. "She's a natural," Ben whispered to me later, as we watched her laughing at one of my father's dry jokes. "She makes Liam happy," I replied, and in that moment, that truly was all that mattered. The rehearsal the next day was a study in calm efficiency. Serafina, in collaboration with her wedding planner, guided us all through the ceremony with a gentle but firm hand. There was only one moment that struck me as odd. I had gone back into the main house to find a restroom and overheard Serafina on the phone in one of the sitting rooms. Her voice was different, harder, more precise. "The liquidity is essential. I don't care what you have to do," she was saying. "The transfers need to be timed perfectly. We have one chance at this." When she saw me standing in the doorway, her entire demeanor shifted in a heartbeat. The hard lines of her face softened into the serene smile I was growing used to. "Elara, hi. Just dealing with a last-minute catering snafu. The eternal joys of wedding planning." Her voice was back to its usual soft, melodic cadence. As she glided past me, I noticed she was holding a sleek, silver smartphone. Later that afternoon, by the cliffside where the ceremony would take place, I saw her texting on a different phone, this one in a dark green case. It was a small thing, a detail most would overlook. But in my work, small details are everything. I dismissed it. A work phone, a personal phone. It was nothing. That evening, at the rehearsal dinner held at a charming restaurant in town, Serafina gave a beautiful, heartfelt toast. She spoke of feeling lost until she met Liam, of how our family had welcomed her so completely that she finally felt she'd found a true home. My mother's eyes welled with tears, and my father beamed with pride. Everything was, on the surface, perfect. But as Ben and I walked back to our room at the manor under a canopy of stars, a sliver of disquiet remained. It was a feeling I knew well from my studio, the almost imperceptible wobble of a pot on the wheel, a warning that the center wasn't quite true. The second day of festivities began with a late breakfast on the manor's expansive deck. Serafina was already there when we arrived, looking fresh and poised in a simple linen dress, a cup of tea cradled in her hands as she stared out at the ocean. "Good morning, you too," she called, her smile as bright as the morning sun glinting off the water. "Isn't it the most perfect day?" As we ate, I noticed her again on her phone, stepping away from the table several times for hushed conversations. On one occasion, I went inside to refill my coffee and saw her through the open door of the library, pacing as she spoke. "Listen, the preliminary portfolios have to be flawless," she said, her voice sharp and urgent. He's cautious. The trust has to be absolute before we can even suggest the merger. Everything depends on Monday. She saw me, and again, the instant transformation. She ended the call quickly. The auction house, she explained with a sigh, pressing her fingers to her temple. We're trying to acquire a collection for the trust. The negotiations are maddening. I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the voice on the phone didn't belong to the serene woman who now stood before me. Back on the deck, I noticed she was using the silver phone again. I mentioned the two phones to Ben. Maybe one is for her nonprofit work, he suggested, but his brow was furrowed. I could tell he found it strange, too. The day was filled with activities. Serafina had arranged for a local guide to take the guests on a walk through the coastal rainforest, while the bridal party was scheduled for final dress fittings. As a bridesmaid, I spent the afternoon in a cloud of silk and pins. In the bridal suite, I watched Serafina manage her other bridesmaids. Her control was subtle, couched in compliments and suggestions that were, in reality, directives. Oh, Isabel, that shade of lipstick is lovely, but I think the coral we chose yesterday brings out your eyes so much more, don't you? She said to one girl, who immediately wiped her lips and reapplied the other color. During a lull, I found myself talking to Chloe, the maid of honor and Serafina's supposed cousin. I mentioned how impressive it was that Serafina had secured a fellowship at the Uffizi right out of college. Chloe looked momentarily blank. The Uffizi? I thought her post-grad work was in London, with Sotheby's, she said, then quickly corrected herself. Oh, goodness, you know how it is. She's done so much, I can never keep it all straight. Before I could press further, Serafina was there, linking her arm through Chloe's. What are my two favorite ladies chatting about? She asked, her tone light, but her eyes were fixed on Chloe with an unreadable intensity. Just admiring your incredible resume, I said with a smile. Later, I saw an interaction that truly unsettled me. The florist, a kindly local woman, approached Serafina with a question about a particular type of rose not being available. Serafina's smile tightened. I was assured it wouldn't be a problem, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying a distinct chill. I expect the arrangements to look exactly as we discussed. I trust you'll find a solution. When she noticed me watching from across the room, her expression instantly softened. She touched the florist's arm. I'm so sorry, Martha. The stress is making me a monster. Please, use your judgment. I know it will be beautiful. Martha looked flustered but relieved, scurrying away like a startled mouse. That evening, Ben and I had dinner alone, a welcome respite from the whirlwind. How was your day? I asked as we sat by the window of a small seaside bistro. Interesting, he replied, swirling the wine in his glass. I was chatting with one of Liam's groomsmen, a friend from law school. He was telling me the story of how Liam and Serafina met. At the fundraiser, right? That's what Liam says. But I was talking to Chloe earlier, and she mentioned that Serafina always tells people they met on a hiking trail near Mount Hood. I frowned. That's specific. And different. It's more than that, Ben said, leaning forward. It's a pattern of small inconsistencies. Her education, her work history, how they met. Each one is a tiny crack. But when you put them all together, he trailed off, his gaze thoughtful. As we walked back to the manor along the beach, the moon casting a silver path on the water, I found myself replaying every interaction, every conversation. The smooth explanations, the polished facade, the moments when the mask seemed to slip. I tried to convince myself it was just wedding jitters, that I was being overly critical of the woman who made my beloved brother so happy. But the feeling persisted, a cold current beneath the warm surface of the celebration. Something was not centered. Something was not true. The wedding day rose from the ocean, a masterpiece of soft gray and pale gold. From our balcony, I watched the staff setting up white chairs on the lawn overlooking the sea, a simple arch of driftwood and white roses waiting at the end of the aisle. Despite my apprehension, I felt a wave of hope. This was Liam's day. I would put my doubts aside and celebrate with him. The bridal suite was a hive of controlled, happy chaos. Serafina sat in a silk robe at the center of it all, a vision of tranquility as her hair and makeup were perfected. "Alara," she said, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror. "Come, sit. I have something for you." She motioned to a small, velvet-wrapped box. Inside lay a beautiful silver locket, engraved with a delicate wave pattern. "To thank you for being such a wonderful sister to Liam, and now to me," she said softly. "Your family's acceptance means the world." The gesture was so thoughtful, so perfect, that I felt a pang of shame for my suspicions. "It's beautiful, Serafina." "Thank you." The ceremony was achingly beautiful. Liam, looking impossibly handsome and nervous in his dark gray suit, waited at the altar. When Serafina appeared on her father's arm, a collective gasp went through the guests. Her dress was simple, elegant, flowing around her like sea foam. The look on my brother's face as he watched her approach was one of pure, unadulterated love, and it was enough to make my own eyes burn. Their vows were personal, eloquent. Serafina spoke of finding a safe harbor in Liam, of being welcomed into the warm embrace of our family. Her voice caught with emotion at all the right moments. As they exchanged rings, the sun broke fully through the clouds, bathing them in light. I let my doubts dissolve in the sheer beauty of the moment. This was real. This had to be. At the reception, held under a large, elegant tent on the lawn, Serafina was the consummate hostess. She drifted between tables, a word for everyone, a radiant smile that never faltered. She spent a great deal of time with my parents, ensuring their wine glasses were never empty, engaging my father in a deep conversation. I noticed something then. Apart from Chloe, the cousin, and the distinguished, silver-haired couple introduced as her aunt and uncle, Serafina seemed to have no other family present. Her parents were there, of course. Her father, a tall, imposing man named Mr. Vance, was quiet and observant. Her mother was charming, but seemed almost scripted. Where are all her friends from college? I murmured to Ben as we shared a slow dance. Or from her fellowship in Italy. Almost everyone here is from Liam's side, or they're friends of her parents. Ben's arm tightened around my waist. I noticed that, too. And listened to her father. His accent. It's vaguely British, but it slips sometimes. Now that he'd pointed it out, I started listening. As Mr. Vance spoke to my father about investment philosophies, I could hear it, a subtle shift in vowel sounds, a cadence that wasn't quite consistent. My father, who had built his company on integrity and a deep understanding of his craft, was clearly impressed. "Robert," he was saying to Mr. Vance, "your approach to diversified, ethical portfolios is fascinating. I've been looking for new avenues for my company's foundation. Arthur, with your reputation for quality and my contacts in emerging European markets, we could build something truly significant." "Something lasting," Mr. Vance replied, his voice smooth as polished mahogany. I watched Ben out of the corner of my eye. He was on his phone, ostensibly taking photos, but his focus was too sharp, his movements too deliberate. He was documenting. Capturing Serafina with her family, with my father, with Liam. The night wound down in a haze of music, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. By the time Ben and I made our way back to our room, my feet ached and my mind was buzzing with a strange mix of joy and foreboding. The day had been flawless, yet a discordant note hummed just beneath the surface. "Did you have a good time?" Ben asked as he loosened his tie. "Yes," I said, though it felt like a partial truth. "Mostly. Did you?" He paused, looking out the window at the dark, restless ocean. "It was an education," he said. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. We were both too exhausted to dissect it further, and we fell into a troubled sleep, the sound of the waves a constant, unquiet presence. The post-wedding brunch was set for 11 a.m. on the deck. Despite the late night, most of the guests were there, nursing cups of coffee and glasses of champagne. Liam and Serafina, the happy newlyweds, were the center of attention. Serafina had transformed yet again, now the picture of a relaxed, gracious new wife in a simple cream-colored sweater and jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders. Ben had been distant all morning, his phone a constant companion. He'd stepped away for several short, tense calls, which he'd brushed off as checking on a deadline with the firm. This was unlike him. When Ben was on vacation, he was fully present. We sat with my parents, who were still basking in the glow of the wedding. "Isn't she just a treasure?" my mother sighed, watching Serafina laugh with one of Liam's friends. "So poised, so intelligent. Liam is a lucky man." "And her father is a brilliant strategist," my father added, his voice low and excited. "Robert and I are having lunch in Portland next week. We're discussing a potential joint venture to fund artisans in developing countries. It's a legacy project, Helen. Exactly what I've been looking for." My stomach tightened. "Dad, are you sure about moving so quickly with someone you've just met?" He looked at me, slightly taken aback. "Alara, Robert Vance isn't just someone. He's a respected figure in global finance. This is a tremendous opportunity." Just then, Ben's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and I saw his entire body go rigid. "Excuse me," he said, his voice tight. He stood and walked to the far end of the deck, his back to us as he took the call. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he paced back and forth. He was gone for nearly 10 minutes. When he returned, his face was pale and set like stone. At that exact moment, Serafina approached our table, her smile radiant. "Arthur," she said to my father, "I was so intrigued by your mention of the Krenov method in your woodworking. It's such a specific philosophy. I'd love to hear more about how it informs your business model." My father's face lit up, and he began to explain the intricate details of his craft. But my mind snagged on her question. The Krenov method was an obscure, almost spiritual approach to cabinet making, something my father only discussed with fellow artisans or deep admirers of his work. It wasn't public knowledge. How could she possibly know about it? It was then that Ben leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "We need to leave," he whispered, his voice urgent and sharp. "Right now." I turned to him, my heart starting to pound. "What?" "We can't. Trust me, Alara. We have to go. I'll explain in the car." His grip on my arm was firm. "Is it the firm? An emergency?" "No," he said, his eyes flicking for a fraction of a second toward Serafina, who was now listening to my father with rapt attention. "It's about the bride." "What on earth are you talking about?" I hissed, my voice trembling. Ben's jaw was tight. "You really haven't seen it, have you? The polish is too perfect. The stories don't line up. It's all a performance." He took a deep breath. "The woman your brother married, she's not who she says she is. Not even close." My blood ran cold. The unease that had been a faint hum for days crescendoed into a deafening roar in my head. What he said next shattered the beautiful illusion of the past 3 days. "Serafina Vance doesn't exist. Your brother married a professional con artist. And her target, from the very beginning, was your father." I stared at him, my mind refusing to process the words. "That's impossible." "Ben, how could you know that?" "I'll show you. But we have to be out of her sight. Now." Ben stood, his expression shifting into one of convincing regret. "I am so sorry, everyone," he announced to the table. "I just got an urgent call from my office. A major structural issue on a project. We have to get back to Portland immediately." My mother's face fell. "Oh no. On a Sunday?" "I wish it could wait," Ben said, his voice a perfect blend of frustration and apology. "I wouldn't leave if it weren't critical." I stood in a daze as Ben made our excuses to a disappointed Liam and a perfectly concerned Serafina. "I was so looking forward to spending the day with you," she said, embracing me. "But we'll have a lifetime for that. Drive safely." As she hugged me, her cheek cool against mine, I felt a tremor of ice in my veins. It wasn't a hug, it was a dismissal. 20 minutes later, we were in our car, speeding south on Highway 101. The moment the manor was out of sight, I turned to my husband. "Explain," I demanded, my voice shaking. "Now." Ben pulled into a scenic viewpoint overlooking the turbulent ocean. He took out his phone and opened a secure file, his hands steady. "I had a bad feeling from the first night," he began, his tone calm and methodical. The way she mirrored everyone, the small contradictions. It reminded me of a deposition I sat in on once, for a fraud case. The performance was flawless, but the details didn't hold up under scrutiny. "So you just decided she was a criminal?" I asked, still reeling. No. So I decided to check, he said. After the rehearsal dinner, I called a friend of mine from university. He runs a corporate intelligence firm. I asked him, as a personal favor, to do a deep dive background check on Serafina Vance. You investigated my brother's fiancé? I was stunned. I was hoping I was wrong, Alara. I was praying I was just being paranoid, he said, his voice softening. But the report he sent me this morning, it's worse than I imagined. He handed me the phone. On the screen was a driver's license from Illinois for a woman named Anya Petrova. The photo was undeniably Serafina, though her hair was blonde and cut short. This is from 4 years ago in Chicago, Ben said. She was married to a real estate developer. She vanished 6 months after the wedding, along with $3 million from a new investment fund he'd just opened with her father. I scrolled, my hands trembling. There were more identities. A woman named Claire DuBois in Denver, married to an oil executive. A Chloe Martin in Austin, married to a tech entrepreneur. The hair changed, the names changed, but the face was the same. And the pattern was terrifyingly consistent. This can't be real, I whispered, staring at news clippings of financial scams, police reports, and warnings from private security firms. My friend's firm has linked her to at least 4 other high-value scams over the last decade, Ben continued. Anya Petrova seems to be her real name. She works with a small, professional crew. The people playing her parents, her cousin, they're actors. Specialists in this kind of long con. But Liam, he doesn't have that kind of money. Liam was never the target, Ben said, his eyes filled with grim certainty. Your father was. Liam was the key to the door. I sat in a heavy silence, the rhythmic crash of the waves outside a funereal drumbeat. The evidence on Ben's phone was irrefutable. Marriage certificates, corporate filings for shell companies, even a grainy security photo of Anya Petrova meeting with the man who was currently posing as her father, Robert Vance, in a Zurich hotel 2 years prior. He was a known figure to international fraud investigators. What happened to the other husbands? I asked, my voice thin. Financial and professional ruin, mostly, Ben said quietly. The developer in Chicago declared bankruptcy. The man in Austin lost his company. They were so thoroughly discredited that pressing charges would have exposed their own poor judgment to the world. And now she's married to my brother, I said, the full horror of it washing over me. That lunch next week. Dad was going to sign documents, transfer funds. That's the move, Ben confirmed. Gain trust, create a plausible joint venture, secure the initial seed money, and vanish. I thought of all the little details, the 2 phones, the shifting stories, the overheard conversations about liquidity and portfolios. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. We have to tell them. We have to stop it. We need to be careful, Ben cautioned. People like this are experts at gaslighting. If we go in half-cocked, she'll turn it around on us, make us look like we're jealous or crazy. She might even accelerate her plan. So what do? We get undeniable proof that links her directly to a crime against our family. Then we present it all at once. He looked at me, his expression resolute. Her knowing about the Krenov method, that was a mistake. She overplayed her hand. How would she know that? My blood ran cold. Dad's laptop. He brought it with him. He was showing her father some designs on it last night. We need to see if it's been compromised, Ben said, already starting the car. We need to move, now. We drove to a coffee shop in the next town over to use their Wi-Fi. I called a friend of mine, a woman named Maya who was a gifted cybersecurity analyst. My hands shook as I quietly explained the situation. Maya, I need you to do something for me, and it's a massive ask. I need you to check my father's systems for any unauthorized access. My father had mentored Maya years ago. She owed him her career and trusted him implicitly. After I got my father on the phone, feigning a question about his business software to get his permissions and passwords, Maya went to work. An hour later, she called back, her voice strained. Alara, someone installed a keylogger on his laptop 2 days ago. A very sophisticated one. It's been capturing everything. Passwords, banking information, private emails. Can you tell where it came from? I whispered. The intrusion originated from a device on the same local network as your father. Someone at that house, Alara. I've isolated his machine and scrubbed the malware, but they have everything he's typed for the past 48 hours. I relayed the information to Ben. His face was a grim mask. That's it, he said. That's the concrete proof. They're not just planning a scam, they've committed a crime. We're going back. We drove back to Saltwood Manor under a sky that had turned a stormy gray. I texted Liam, we're on our way back. There's something urgent we have to discuss. Please meet us in the library. Alone. Liam was waiting for us, his expression a mixture of confusion and irritation. What is going on? You leave, you come back, all the secrecy. I took a deep breath, my heart aching for the pain I was about to cause him. Liam, what we're about to tell you is going to be difficult to believe. But Serafina is not who you think she is. His face hardened. What are you talking about? Alara, that's a terrible thing to say. Ben stepped forward and opened his laptop on the large oak table. Serafina Vance is an invented identity, Liam. The woman you married is named Anya Petrova. She's a professional con artist. Liam let out a short, incredulous laugh. You're insane. Both of you. Please, Liam. Just look, I begged, my voice cracking. For the next 20 minutes, we laid it all out. The other identities, the other husbands, the identical pattern of fraud. We showed him the report from Maya about the keylogger on Dad's laptop. With every piece of evidence, the color drained from my brother's face. The confident annoyance was replaced by a creeping, horrified doubt. This can't be. We've been together for nearly a year, he whispered, sinking into a chair. I'd know. She's a professional, Liam, Ben said gently. This is her entire life's work. So it was all a lie, he asked, his voice breaking. All of it. The anguish in his eyes was a physical blow. Just as I moved to comfort him, the library door swung open. My father stood there. What's all this? He asked. Serafina said you were back. Liam looked from the laptop screen to my face, a silent, desperate question in his eyes. I gave a slight nod. Dad, Liam said, his voice raw but steady. You need to see this. It's about Serafina. My father's reaction was what I expected. First disbelief, then anger directed at us for the outrageous accusation. But Ben was calm and methodical. He walked our father through the evidence, piece by piece, culminating in the cybersecurity report. The moment my father understood that his private financial data had been stolen, his expression changed from outrage to a cold, hard fury I had rarely seen. We are confronting her, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Now. We should call the police first, Ben urged. My father shook his head. No, not yet. First, I want to look her in the eye. Liam, who had been staring at a photo of him and Serafina on his phone, suddenly stood up. I have to be the one to do it, he said. Alone. Absolutely not, I said instantly. Liam, these people could be dangerous. She is my wife, he said, the words catching in his throat. If this is the truth, I have to hear it from her. We compromised. Liam would lead the confrontation, but we would all be there. My father insisted my mother be present as well. We gathered in my parents' suite, a somber, terrified jury, and sent a message for Serafina to join us for an urgent family matter. She arrived a few minutes later, the picture of concern. What is it? What's wrong? She asked, her gaze sweeping across our grim faces. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. Then Liam stepped forward. We know, Serafina, he said, his voice quiet but clear. Or should I call you Anya? For a single, flickering second, her mask of composure was gone. I saw it, a flash of pure, cold calculation in her eyes. Then it was back. Liam, darling, what are you talking about? You're not making any sense. Ben moved to the laptop. We have everything. The marriage certificates, the corporate records, the police reports from Denver and Chicago. She laughed, a brittle, unconvincing sound. This is absurd. It must be a case of mistaken identity. There is no mistake, my father said, his voice like flint. We also have forensic proof that our private network was breached and spyware was installed on my computer. An attempt to access my financial accounts. Her eyes narrowed, darting toward the door. Don't, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. The local police have been alerted. It was a bluff, but a necessary one. I don't know what kind of twisted game this is, she said, her voice turning hard, but I will not be slandered. Liam, surely you don't believe this madness. Liam's face was a canvas of heartbreak. I want to believe you, Sarah. God, I want to. So explain it. Explain why a woman named Anya Petrova, who looks exactly like you, married a man in Chicago 4 years ago. She held her facade of righteous indignation for another long moment. Then, seeing the unshakable certainty on our faces, something inside her seemed to snap. Her posture changed. The soft lines of her face hardened. The mask didn't just slip, it disintegrated. Well, she said, and her voice was utterly transformed. It was lower, with the faintest trace of an Eastern European accent. This is a disappointing turn of events. I underestimated you, Mr. Architect. She gave Ben a curt nod. Most people are so much easier to read. My mother let out a small, strangled gasp. Liam took a step back, as if he'd been physically struck. Why, he whispered, his voice hollow. Was any of it real? Anya, I could only think of her as Anya now, tilted her head, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. You were a kind man, Liam. I didn't dislike you. But this was never personal. It was a business transaction. What business? My father demanded. Destroying families? Stealing from people. She smiled, a cold, thin line. I see it as wealth redistribution. Men like you have more money than you know what to do with. I simply facilitate its movement. And your accomplices? Ben asked. Your family? Gone, she said with a dismissive shrug. They left last night. Standard protocol. The clinical way she spoke of it, of her wedding to my brother as protocol, made me feel sick. You won't get away with this, my father stated. Won't I? She countered. Prosecuting me would mean a very public, very embarrassing story for your family. Is that the kind of press you want, Arthur? It might make your investors nervous. She was right, and the threat hung in the air. You're forgetting the other men you swindled, Liam said, his voice gaining a surprising strength. They might not have talked individually, but a federal prosecutor will see a pattern. For the first time, a flicker of genuine concern crossed her face. This has been an interesting diversion, she said, reaching for her handbag. But I believe it's time for me to leave. Actually, my father said, holding up his phone. While we've been chatting, my security team has been in contact with the FBI's white-collar crime division. They've been looking for you, Anya. And they are very, very interested in your whereabouts. True fear finally dawned in her eyes. You're bluffing. My father simply turned the phone to show her an email confirmation. You have 2 choices, he said calmly. You can wait here for them to arrive. Or you can try to run. Your crew is gone. Your assets are likely already frozen. It's over. Anya Petrova looked around the room, a cornered animal, her perfect composure shattered. Her eyes landed on Liam, one last time. I could have made you happy, she said, a final, pathetic attempt at manipulation. Liam shook his head, his expression a tragic mixture of pity and revulsion. No, you couldn't have. Because the person I loved never existed at all. The days that followed were a surreal blur of law enforcement interviews and shocking revelations. Anya Petrova was part of a highly sophisticated international fraud ring. The FBI had been building a case against her network for years, but she was notoriously slippery. Liam was devastated, a ghost moving through the beautiful house that was meant to be the site of his happiest memories. The marriage was swiftly annulled, a legal fiction erased. We told the handful of remaining guests a vague story of misrepresentation and irreconcilable discoveries. The truth was too raw, too complex for public consumption. We learned that Anya's crew had been planning their infiltration for more than a year, identifying my father as a prime target because of his sterling reputation and the liquid assets within his company's foundation. The level of research was chilling. They had files on all of us, our routines, our passions, our vulnerabilities. Liam's idealism and deep love for his family had made him the perfect entry point. In the aftermath, our family, which had always been close, became a fortress. My parents wrapped Liam in a protective embrace. Ben and I stayed for 2 weeks, my pottery wheel back in Portland gathering dust. Sometimes I would just sit with Liam on the deck, watching the endless gray waves, no words needed. Slowly, life began to reassemble itself. A year later, we gathered at my parents' house for a quiet dinner. Liam had moved back to Portland and was thriving at a new law firm. He was thinner, and there was a new caution in his eyes, but his smile was genuine again. "You know what I learned," he said, as we lingered over coffee. "It's that true strength isn't about never being fooled. It's about how you put yourself back together afterward. It's about realizing that real love doesn't isolate you, it integrates you. It makes your foundation stronger." My mother reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "And that true value isn't in what can be stolen, but in what can't." Ben's hand found mine under the table. His quiet perception, his refusal to ignore the subtle dissonance, had saved us from a disaster that went far beyond money. It had saved our family's trust in itself. The ordeal had left its scars, but it had also taught us a profound lesson. It taught us to listen to that quiet, internal voice, the one that whispers when something isn't centered or true. It taught us that the most convincing illusions are built to prey on our best qualities, our trust, our hope, our capacity for love. But in the end, those are the very qualities that allow us to heal, to rebuild, and to find our way back to the light. We had been targeted for our closeness, but it was that same closeness that had been our salvation. The bond between us, like the ancient rock in the sea, had been battered by a storm, but it had not been broken.